Okay, so Prime Minister's question times today. I watched a clip from JSUK News. I'll leave that link down below. But there are things that are said that I disagree with, obviously, as Conservatives have this notion of constantly lying or giving misinformation and half-truths. But there are things towards the end of the clip that I couldn't stomach. So I want to go through them. Theresa May is defending the Conservatives, saying that they've done more good for the country than any Labour government before. Saying it's because of them that there is a national living wage. Well, let's look at that. They've made sure that the national living wage doesn't actually keep up with inflation. And in fact, it's much lower than what Labour would put in if they were in government right now. They were pressured into doing it, not because they wanted to, but because they had to. And even then, they've made sure that it doesn't match up with inflation, so more people are out of pocket. She seems to have this grand notion of being a hero because she's made sure that there are less people paying tax now. Well, let's look at the people who aren't paying tax. Multi-millionaires and multi-billionaires. Ed Sheeran paid more tax last year than Jeff Bezos, the richest man in the world, who has offices in the UK. It's not that people who have the least amount are now not paying tax. I've been working since I've been working since 2006. And I've been solidly employed since 2010, barring a few months. There has never been a time where I have not paid tax. Even when I was unemployed and taking job seekers allowance, I was paying tax on that. And for all that time, I was on minimum wage. This job that I started 2 years ago is the first time I have not been on minimum wage. Still paying tax. So when Theresa May comes out and says there are less people paying tax, it's not the people at the bottom of the spectrum. It's the people at the top who should be paying tax. 3.3 million jobs. Okay, sounds brilliant. But as I've said before, they've managed to come up with that number by redefining what unemployed and employed is. As far as the Conservative government is concerned, if you work 1 hour a fortnight, you are in full-time employment. I can work 1 hour a fortnight in my local convenience shop. That will not pay my bills, that will not pay for food, that will not keep a roof over my head. But as far as they're concerned, that means full-time employment. NHS cash boost. She claims that she's giving the NHS the biggest cash boost it's ever had. I did a video on the NHS earlier on in the year. This government and Conservatives in general have defunded the NHS more than any other government beforehand. The fact that she wants to take credit for giving more money to the NHS is disgusting when you take into consideration it was her and her predecessor, David Cameron, who defunded the NHS to the point where it needed more money to survive, to limp on. And yet it's still being mismanaged under Matthew Hancock. You don't get credit for starting a fire and then bringing a hose. Tax cuts. Okay. Tax cuts. Okay, let's get into that. Jacob Rees-Mogg pays less tax than I do. Jacob Rees-Mogg has 2 jobs. Fantastic. I have multiple jobs. Jacob Rees-Mogg's second job pays him, it's either £300 an hour or £500 an hour. Either way, that is way more than anything I'm earning. And yet I pay more tax, not as a percentage, but in general. I give more money to this government than he does. I give more money than Theresa May and her husband does. I give more money than the wealthiest in this country. So when she comes out and says about tax cuts, Every journalist worth their salt needs to make damn sure people know that it's not tax cuts for the vulnerable. It's tax cuts for the wealthy who do not need it. During this time, Jeremy Corbyn brilliantly brought up the UN report. Conservatives stuck to their typical response. They don't believe it. Okay, get out of Westminster and walk down the fucking street. Charlie Elfrick clearly doesn't believe that poverty is an issue. If he walked the streets of Dover, and bear in mind, Dover's not that big, he would see that poverty is a problem. He would see that homelessness is a problem. If he looked at the damn facts, the same as Theresa May and everyone else on that side of the bench, they would see poverty is an issue. The UN report wasn't BS, designed to sow miscontent and misdeeds and misgivings and everything else. It wasn't designed to doubt. It was reporting on the cold hard facts. This government have forced more people into poverty than anyone else. Now, again, this is easy to say in hindsight as I'm not there, I can't do anything. But if I was there, I would have loved to have given Jeremy Corbyn a little bit of paper. When I say a little bit of paper, it would go on for a fair old whack. On that paper would be the names of every single person who has died as a direct result of universal credits. That list is already out there, and it is devastating. The fact that Theresa May, Amber Rudd and every other one of those disgusting people just ignore it shows time and time again they are not fit for office. And the bullshit they come up with, tax cuts, more jobs being created, all these lies are going unchallenged by everyone in the media. I've said it before, BBC have some great journalists, and it's not the journalist's fault, but it is BBC's fault for not calling Theresa May out on her lies. It is ITV's fault for not calling Theresa May out on her lies, the same as Sky and everywhere else. If you're a politician and you lie, you should be fact-checked, like that. It doesn't matter if you're small time or big time. It should be plastered everywhere that you lied and this is the reality. Unfortunately, we have a media that supports the right, whether it's blatantly obvious or whether it's the subtle things that sow discontent when it comes to people on the left like Jeremy Corbyn. The reality is Theresa May and the Conservatives will do everything they can to take from you and give to the wealthy. They are just that disgusting.